Ta-da! The little red light is flashing.
Good, we're on.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Meditation Australia online interview series. My name's Megan Spencer. I'll be your host and the interviewer for today. I'm a registered member with Meditation Australia, which is the national peak industry body for meditation and meditation teachers in Australia. I'm also a board member and sometimes I'm a broadcaster as well. And we thought it would be a great idea to bring you some inspiring conversations with some inspiring people doing inspiring stuff in the world of meditation and meditation teaching. And today I'm super happy and excited to introduce you to Jess Huon. Hi, Jess.
Hey, Megan.
She will be our guest speaker today. And Jess, if you'll indulge me just for a second, I'll just read out a bit of an introduction that I've put together from your hub, your website. So I'll just go ahead and summarize that for everybody, for those who haven't met you before. It's the first time you and I have met, actually, and so this is from Jess's website. Jess is an authorised teacher within the Insight tradition and Open Dharma, which is a collective of teachers and seekers, exploring teachings from various wisdom traditions to transform the lives of individuals, communities and societies. She began what she calls her meditative and embodiment practices in her late teens, and since then has trained in traditional Buddhist monastic settings, in interfaith contexts of meditative inquiry, and also within long periods of solitary forest practice in places like India, Australia, Spain, and the USA. This is very amazing too. In 2009, Jess Huon was awarded a scholarship to study Buddhist texts at the very famous Spirit Rock Insight Meditation Center in California. She holds a Bachelor of Creative Arts at from VCA and a postgraduate degree in Therapeutic Arts practice from RMIT, which is my old alma mater as well, as it turns out. She teaches a myriad of classes, courses and retreats from her home base in Melbourne and across Melbourne, also Vipassana at Melbourne Insight Group, as well as running yatras, which I'm sure we'll explore today, meditative walks in different wilderness areas. And she also runs mentoring programs for people to deepen their personal practice. So you've done a lot of stuff throughout your meditation career, can we call it, or path? So far, Jess, and I have to tell you, just reading through your bio and background and finding out the kinds of programs that you run and why you run them, there seems to be a really integrative approach with you that it's a bit hard to know where you start and your practice ends and vice versa. It all seems to be part of your life. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind starting just telling us a little bit about the spiritual side of your practice before we start moving through some of the other areas of inquiry today.
The spiritual side.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes that's the sort of hardest thing to really articulate, but I think it's like when you sort of deeply realize that you're here in this body for this one life, and there's some burn or some feeling that I want to really live this to my capacity, and some feeling that can rise up that I don't know, that wants to outshine the limitations. But I think it's something that kind of comes from below. It's not from the head, that urge. It's like a seed that sort of wants to crack through and open and express. So I had that kind of burn quite young, in a sort of surprising way. It did sort of come through a difficult period, where I was sort of faced with my own constraint or faced with particular sufferings that were really concerning me, internally and externally. And there was a burn that there was something else, that there was a deeper place I could rest, that there was something more to my mind and myself than just this, just the thinking process or what was going on in that moment you know, that there was more that I didn't know yet, but I had a yearning to explore.
Wow. What a lovely way to describe it. It's no, I know I can see you trying to get it out, and you did beautifully. That makes
Well,
so
because
much sense. Like it was beautifully articulated, if you'll allow that feedback. I'm sorry to lob a big one on you at the start.
just because I think people do love Buddhism and mindfulness because it is so secular, because it's so translatable to our modern minds. But the underlying movement of that, which does have some sort of devotional expression or some movement of the heart, can't always be so mapped and articulated, you know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Whereas the
Yeah.
path can and the methods can to help get there. But that desire is so unique to each of us, for communion, for connection, to
I think we've got a bit of a pause in the connection. Speaking of connection, here you come again, I think.
part of
Yeah.
something bigger to be held in a wider reference point, I think, for our life. Yeah.
Jess, I think we've just lost you. We've got a very bad.
Yeah, I can't see. Oh, internet, is that better now?
Yeah, yeah. We've
Okay.
just lost the last minute or so of what you were saying there. Would you mind repeating?
Okay, yeah, I was firing up then.
I know it was great. I could see it, but it was sort of the connection, ironically, was wobbling while you were connecting.
Oh, I was saying, I think as well, like that spiritual yearning to be held in something wider than just our individual self, a sense of wider belonging, or a sense of, yeah, a wider identity to who we are that's not just our personality and where we've grown up or where we're from and all these more conditioned aspects of our being, but some urge for deeper connection.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, thank you for answering that. Yeah, but you do, there does seem to be a deep love affair between yourself
Hmm.
and meditation. Yeah, and I'm wondering
That's
if you
interesting
can,
to
if
see
you,
that.
well, well, I guess it's your writing. It's the way you write too. Like you've written all of your text on the website, and it was quite profound and poetic. It really moved me. So we've not met, but I got a sense of what practice
Yeah.
means to you. So, and I'm wondering if, because you do have this kind of deep love with it, is that what your teaching grew out of, wanting to share that, or was there some other kind of motivation for that?
I think I just got so taken by practice and I pursued it so wholeheartedly, in some ways sort of extremely. I've had to balance out later in life, you know, that at a certain point there was a ripening and there was just a natural movement to share. And my teachers said, you know, you're ready now, like, so start teaching. So it sort of came from that push from my teachers, but also just, I think, I didn't know that I was going to teach, but I was just following it so deeply. I wasn't sure what else was going to happen, but then it did start to ripen and things sort of fell into place. And yeah, so quite a natural movement of a sort of readiness. And I think there's some point when you've been practicing for a certain amount of time that learning to articulate it to others and to get behind what you really care about, even if it's been a bit secret for a while, because still when I was practicing, meditation was a bit weird, you know? So to kind of come out with what we really care about, I think can also start to empower our practice, because it demands a congruency between our inner life and then how we express that. Mm.
I was going to ask you this later, but I think time's right to ask you now. What does teaching, what does teaching give you beyond what you've just described? What else does it give you?
Probably a few things. I think the privilege, you know, when you're in retreats and you enter the silence with other people, what starts to arise in people's beings is very human and intimate and unique. And it's a real privilege to sit with people in such raw intimacy. where we are being a little bit more naked, and we are being a little bit more real about what we really feel in this human situation, you know, which can be pretty overwhelming or frightening or intense. To be able to normalize that process and really meet other people in that, I find such a privilege, and it's so satisfying to be able to connect with people like that. Also, I think to sort of be in a place where I feel I can really express myself, and I can express what I care about, and I can, like, I'm a poet too, you know, so I can like articulate that and allow my own perception and my sense of things, and I can translate those teachings through my own body. It's very energizing, enlivening, sometimes hard, you know, like teaching is not always easy at all. But yeah, I think that the expression of what I care about, and then the intimacy with others, being in a room when everybody gets quiet and everybody gets receptive, and there's a quality of silence and interest, and we're out of this whole modern kind of demand to relate in a certain way and be someone interesting or be so distracted, and we're just there together. You know, sort of immediacy with life is probably one of my favorite feelings, you know.
Yeah. And you also bring, sorry, what was that?
It's alive, that charged feeling when humans come together in presence, a bit deeper than how we usually relate. I used to try and do that in other ways as a teenager, but, you know, like that, it's really, I like that a lot.
No filters, yeah.
No filters, and maybe when there's a little bit more of a focused attention, maybe like art or in the theatre, what can happen in that space when we're really all willing to be there together.
Yeah, well, look, on that, you bring singing and dancing and creative things into teaching too, don't you? Like that also has become integrated into the way you teach.
Yeah, sometimes I go the singing. I always find that a little bit hard because I'm a terrible singer. I can't.
Look, I love it, but I'm so shy about it. I've got a thing around singing and stuff, so I hear you.
Yes. I'm always hesitant because I know when anything gets too prescriptive or people have to speak words that they don't understand, like Sanskrit words, I really don't like imposing things on people that they don't feel from the inside. So I always frame that very clearly around why we're doing this. And when you're sitting all day and then to have some space to let the voice just move and some expression can be really, can be very powerful, and hearing voices together. And you start to then have these hidden gifted, you know, people in the room that have these beautiful harmonies, and it can be incredibly soothing. So I don't always do it, but I sometimes do it. It sort of depends on the crowd. And the dancing has been a little bit more experimental. Women's retreats, I'll definitely do that because I think learning to move our body is another really powerful entry point into the deep. But in sort of co-ed retreats, I have sometimes on the last night we've had some dancing, and I'm always like, oh, should we do this? Is this busting out of the traditional, you know, too much? But in my mind, it's like we have to include everything. How do we be mindful when we're on the cushion? But how do we also be mindful when we're expressing and we're relating? And how do we have a continuity of mindfulness between sitting and also in movement? Because we're not always still, and our practice has to leave the cushion. And I'm for an integrated life, you know, where we really work on our depth and we find our ground, but we're also expressing and in relationship, and dancing is sort of part of that.
Yeah. Look, I think we often don't talk enough about movement in meditation. It's not just about being still on a cushion, like physically still. And of course we can bring that meditative quality or mindful quality of attention to anything that we do, but I think we often sort of overlook that. And most people, like civilians, you know, if they're not a meditator or they've just started, they automatically assume it's just sitting, and that's actually can be really, really difficult for people for all sorts of reasons. So that brings me actually quite nicely into the yatra practice that you lead or co-lead with a group of people, this mindful walks in the wilderness. Would you mind exploring or, speaking to that for us for a bit? Because I was very excited to hear about this. This is quite a long form practice that you lead.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you asked about the yatras. Well, I lead them through another organisation that's run by a very, very dear friend, Ronnie Hickle, who has Yatras Australia. And these yatras, began in India, yatra like a pilgrimage of the heart, around India, and people would be, moving in groups to go and see the sort of sacred relics, or they'd be moving around with some sort of devotional intention, which now I'd translate as just presence and a quality of attention and, aliveness to where we are in the country we're walking in. But so Ronnie, that Christopher Titmuss, the sort of the head of the Insight lineage here in Melbourne, who's from England, he began these yatras through France with a whole lot of students. They're really big now. They're amazing. I've been to one and helped teach a little bit on one. But so then Ronnie thought, I want to do these in Australia. This country is so rich. How can we integrate the Dharma, the teachings, into this land, which I think is also so important, that our inquiry into Dharma is situated into the place that we're living in, which is connected so much to the country. So the yatras are sort of fostering our connection to country here in Australia. I was asked to teach one, I think it was 10 or 12 years ago, down in Tasmania. And ever since then, I've been doing it each year, sometimes once or twice a year, sometimes in the desert. And the form of a yatra, because we're living together for 10 days, we're digging toilets, we're around fires every night, you're in tents. Again, you're pretty naked in front of each other. It fosters community. There's a lot more of a community aspect on the yatras that you don't always get in a silent retreat. And that combination of meditation and walking and being in good company and being in these most pristine, wild environments with a team. The team of the yatras are just such fantastic people, particularly down in Tasmania, or everywhere, but in Tasmania. They're so well held. All of that combination can really start to do something.
Wow, it sounds pretty amazing. And I'm wondering, do you also connect with the Indigenous story that's on those lands, wherever that is, in whatever country, or like in terms of whatever nation you're in as well, or in Australia or overseas? Is that part of it as well?
Yeah.
Becoming aware of where we are and whose land we're on and what's gone before?
On that sense, yeah. When we've done the retreats in the desert, sometimes we'll be able to get an elder to come out, or someone to come out to welcome us to country who's from that place. Sometimes we haven't been able to do that, and sometimes we have. In Tasmania, just slowly, I've started bridging some connections there in the Indigenous community. I was asked to teach at a sort of reconciliation festival that they've got going down there. But on the actual yatras, sometimes there is, but there isn't always. But there's always a deep regard for the Indigenous presence on that country, and that's always very felt. But so I think we'd like to do that more and more, and it's just making those relationships, which can take time, and to do that authentically.
Sure.
But very present. And yeah, sometimes often there are people who have a lot of knowledge that will come forward and speak in the group that end up sort of filling the rest of us in about things.
Well, they sound very healing, I guess is my point. I'm learning more and more. Healing needs to happen on both sides of reconciliation, and recognition and acknowledgement and all that sort of thing, truth telling. But there's a lot of healing that goes with what happened before. So anyway, they sound beautiful and steeped in groundedness.
There's very grounded, and it's another one where you're integrating real practicality with then deep inner inquiry, because you're having to pack up your tent, walk every day, and make sure you've organised your things. Like, it's quite demanding. People are like, whoa. And then you walk for hours in silence.
Wow.
So we're a group walking for hours in silence together in the most pretty amazing environments. And nature has its own healing fork, just nature does. I'm always like teaching out in country, giving talks, and in wild elements have I given talks, like into strong winds and sandstorms and rain. It's very raw, it's very direct, and it's also I think meeting in the forest, again, it's another level where people from all different walks of life come and meet. It's quite a leveler, you know, and it's in the same way Buddha first wanted people to practice in all the forest groves, and he was bringing from all different castes, people who would never usually sit with each other, to sit down under the roots of trees and like look into what is it to be human, what is it to know peace, like really what is a nourishing life at the end of the day, what's going to really cut it for you, is it these things, or you know, what is it? And I always, that image of them all gathering together in those forest groves and the atmosphere I think they were creating, I always get quite inspired just by the feeling of that. And that connects me a bit to the yatras, like practicing close to the roots of trees where you're not kind of in comfort, yet you're held in love and the warmth of the fire and good food. Powerful.
And nature, yeah, it sounds extremely powerful. I've got the
The,
goosebumps happening again.
the deep foundation and mother of nature, to have some relationship to that and to feel, yeah, held in that.
Mm,
I think it's kind of so core, so core.
yeah. And that to me is a definition of spirituality, actually. You cannot escape nature, no matter how much we try. We can't escape our bodies, which are part of nature and the environment around us. Um,
That's interesting. I like what you're saying there.
well, it sort of leads me deeper again with you, Jess. I get also the feeling now listening to you talk and also reading what I read on your website that perhaps, and please, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I get the sense that part of why you teach is to teach people how to carve out a time for the sacred in our lives, because I think we have forgotten the necessity for it, no matter what that definition is for someone. But certainly when I'm in nature and in a deep listening kind of space myself, you know, and just taking it all in, you know, as part of wherever I am, I get that sense of it. You know, it might be a temple, it could be a cathedral, it could be something entirely different. But I get the sense that you want to bring the sacred sort of back to our lives and encourage people to find a way, perhaps through meditation, to give themselves that moment of sacredness each day.
Mm. Yeah, 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 yeah. That feels online. I think I just think we keeping busy and keeping up in our busy minds, which happens so quickly. We're so habituated to thinking and to habitual patterns of thought also that can take us out of home or a sense of ease. And I think we sell ourselves short by not giving ourselves the proper time to know what it is to settle and to know what it is to come into relationship to something in us that is incredibly alive and intelligent and precious in each of us, that takes time to dig into, to feel, to know. And so, yeah, I get sad when I sort of I feel just how much that habituated mind and the pressures of modernity put people in such a crunch, all of us, you know, and I feel, and the consumer capitalist culture is all behind that. So I do think it takes some inner agency or desire to go, no, I want actually like a more connected life, and I can have that. But I do think then it does take a method and practice to sustain it, because habituation's so strong, and then we're thinking about that again, or we're there, and we forget so quickly. And we don't have all those old models so much of the church and certain things that once held us together, like they've been interrogated. A lot of people don't find faith there anymore. Some really do, and I think that's fantastic. I think there's so many different entry points into the deep. I am not, you know, one way at all. But yes, carving out that time for our own depth and our own attention to become softer and kinder, I think it does take something.
Yeah, I love the
So
way you call it the deep. I like that. I like that. I call it the quiet actually, but I like the word sacred. I'm going to reclaim it.
You like
I'm
sacred.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not a church goer in terms of institutions, but certainly I'm fascinated by faith, you know, and I think we can learn a lot from it. But regardless of that, I think yeah, like that pause, that sacred pause, it's right across all faiths, but we need it to survive because we, like you say, we're so habituated towards busyness.
Yeah, and we need that sacred pause so we can look at life with more creativity and freshness. I think it's in that sacred pause that we can actually be motivated to act from inspiration, and where we can be surprised by what can kind of bubble up, you know? Because you see a lot of geniuses and people, it's when they're in like deep ease and they're not so like pummeling something with your head, where you're trying to like solve something through just like squeezing the shit out of it, you know? And we all do that.
Yeah,
We all get into that
yeah,
because we want to, you know, I think we're all pretty responsible. We want to find good solutions, but it's not always
up here,
in
yeah.
it's not always in the busy mind that we will find that. And it's often a shift in perspective and a settling and a soothing and a coming down, whatever way we each do that. Meditation's been my way. That we can access something that's trustworthy and that is creative and that can really support transformative change.
Mm. Jess, a big part of what you do is mentoring people.
Mm.
I'm really curious to hear about this 1 year mentoring scheme that you run called, is it In Your Own Skin?
That's what I called it last
Yeah.
year. Yeah.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. I think I was feeling a maturity growing in my student body, and I am sometimes translating the teachings um, through my own expression of them. And I wanted students to be able to really have their own connection to those teachings in a way that they could own, that it wasn't just kind of coming to me and listening and responding, that they could really forge their own connection to those teachings and have some ownership, some keep, I don't know, like I suppose I'm very experiential in practice, but I am also a bit of a nerd, and I really do appreciate the maps and have tracked those maps a lot. And I wanted to sort of offer some of those basic maps to students so they could then forge their own connection to them, which they were already doing with me through the experience, but just so they could take it even further and be independent in that.
When you say map, Jess, what do you mean exactly?
I think like the maps of the Buddha Dharma, you know,
Okay.
like the,
Yeah.
the Eightfold Path, and
Hmm.
then deepening into the whole phenomenally kind of gift that the Buddha put forward from walking this full-on territory, and then he was a list maker coming back with all of these like pointers, you know, like the grandfather that can sort of point you, this is the way to go, this is what to look out for, you know, because it's not always comfortable. The meditation and the path can be very uncomfortable, so having those guidelines can be of immense support, is a great resource. But it's, yeah, the map to support the experience.
So you run a program over a year. I'm curious, when people come to you, your students, when they are uncomfortable, what's that experience like for you as a teacher?
um oh, it can change, you know. Sometimes I'm totally relaxed with it, sometimes it might work me up too, but I think depends on the territory. But I do think through my own practice and having to negotiate so many of my own states, you know, from, you know, deep pleasure, deep openings to really deep pain, and, you know, all the gnarly states, really, you know, all of it, the whole breadth of what we experience. I sometimes say in this dancing human form, I mean, it's full on, you know. And so the more I'm comfortable with that terrain in myself, I find increasingly I can give a really open gaze to my students. I'm not phased, you know, because I've been there. So I work very experientially like that. I have had the training in the therapeutic arts, so that had a big counselling component, but most of my training has happened through being with teachers and being in retreats and my own practice and watching and learning on my feet, apprenticing to the Dharma in a way. So again, it's beautiful to be able to normalise what society sometimes tries to box as terrible, is it, yeah, this is just big feelings. Let's learn to stay and steady and breathe and meet and be kind. I think we can handle a lot more than we know. I also think there's a time, if things are too much, where we need other support, and I'm all for, you know, I have no issue with medication if that's appropriate or other, but I do think, again, modern culture will push us into a more medical model before we've learned to really find the mindfulness and the skills to find that emotional maturity, to not be frightened of ourselves, you know? So I
Yeah.
kind of get excited when people get uncomfortable, because I'm like, whoa, we're starting to like change. This is where transformation happens. So I also can get excited when I feel people starting to really go deeper than how they've habitually been working and open things up.
In their own skin, yeah. I can see
In their own
why you called it that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you teach a lot of retreats. You seem to really like that as a teacher, and it's a big commitment, not just for participants, but for the teachers as well. So I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit, about why you're drawn to teaching things over periods of time. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I think that was my own training. So that's just how I grew up in that sort of classical holding of the Dharma. So it was, you just go and do lots of retreats with that sort of knowing that it really does take time, like anything, to forge a connection with something. So it was just a model that I kind of, in a sense, grew up in. And I also just think that it takes time to come home and to sustain that. So I think the retreat context, where we're out of our daily life, where we have more time for that sacred pause, like an extended time, and we're held in community and supportive conditions, and kindness and care, and then the teachings, that all of that input can really support a person to come into deeper relationship with themselves in a way that can be really relieving and satisfying, and can start to really see into their own mind. But that takes time.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing to do as a teacher too, isn't it? For you to be able to hold. Look, I know this term is so overused, holding space, but it actually it applies very much to retreat settings, to hold space
Yeah.
for a big group, and what internally they're going through as well, and what you're going through as
Yeah.
the facilitator, and whatever your own stuff is quite complex, isn't it? Holding that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it's also felt for me like a little bit sometimes like a duck into water when we all enter that space together again. When we all start getting quiet, I'm like, yes, you know. It's like, because something starts cooking, you see people start to take layers off, and just to watch someone come back into ease in their own skin, it's like, but it's hard. It's like, sometimes it's like training a horse that's been wild and bucking and running here and there. So at first it's very uncomfortable for people, you know. It's like
Mm.
you're almost fasting off sort of a modern demand and your own mind. But then you start to see something opening up, and it's so precious to see that. And I suppose I lived in India on and off for quite a while practicing, so my life hasn't been so conventional in a way. So my life was just going and teaching retreats and then coming back and going and coming back. Now I'm really wanting more balance in my life, because it does have a demand. It is intense, you know. But I just feel like it's such a, it's great. Yeah, and I need good care, like to know what to do after a retreat, that sense of care, and kind of come down from being in that sort of heightened space with people, learning how to look after yourself in that role, knowing my own needs, you know, which has taken me a long time to really, you know, through trial and error and sometimes exhaustion, you know, like really, that's been a very big thing for me to inquire into. How do I make this sustainable for myself? How do I take care? Who are my resources? Who am I talking to after a retreat to get the support I need? All of that has really taken time, because it's not like it's all written in a handbook, you know. Particularly
Handbook?
when
What handbook?
what handbook?
Yeah,
'Cause these are these are monastic traditions, you know,
yeah,
and
yeah.
they're doing this in like this contemporary context. So that translation, I think, it takes a lot of consideration and care, and we have to keep looking how we can do this well in a way that's healthy for everyone.
Yeah,
Including
reflection. Yeah.
reflection
Yeah.
in that translation from the east to the west.
Yeah, and staying
Oh, yeah.
true to the really great foundations that people learn from in it too. But like you say, self-care afterwards, you can't just lurch from one thing to another. It's not just like ticking off a list, especially when you're teaching meditation, especially doubly, a retreat too, because they are quite transformative. Something will always shift, and we don't know what that will be. Usually, most more often than not.
You're really right. Yeah, we really
Yeah.
don't know what that will be. We don't really know what's in store for us when we start opening up the inner life, but we can
You
learn
you
more.
mentioned sustainability, Jess, and also earlier you were talking about like just how capitalism and the demands of that can crunch us. And because we are speaking to meditation teachers today, plus
Yeah.
meditators, but primarily meditation teachers in the MA community, I'm just wondering, maybe you could speak to your business model, which I believe is based on dana, the principle of generosity. Is
Mhm.
that how you financially sustain yourself?
Yeah, yes, the majority of my income is on donation. The base costs of retreats people pay, and they'll pay a small charge pretty much for like a day workshop or an evening event. Um, so that's been pretty edgy. Again, translating something that's so known in the East to the West, but that's been in my lineage. So I've held steady to that because I don't want to see the Dharma becoming an elite thing that is only for a certain group of people. At the same time, like I do offer my one-to-one mentoring sessions on a sliding scale, and I also do some other paid gigs out of that model where I am paid, just in an appropriate way. Well, and that's part of my sustainability, opening up these other arms of my work that I've had to do by necessity, but wanting to keep that pure dana stream alive as well. Yeah, and that's sort of an ongoing conversation with other teachers and Melbourne Insight community, how we keep that alive and working. And
But you work at that. It's interesting. Like,
yeah,
again, it goes back to my first question to you, which is about really integrating practice into every aspect of your life.
yeah.
Because that can't be easy.
No, that's been very risky and edgy at times. But I've always got through. And I mean, before I also had other work, like I've been a writer and I've published work, and not that gets you a lot of money, but I've worked in a theatre company and that sustained me for a while.
Yeah.
It was a theatre company of people with intellectual disabilities. So that was a big part of my work for about 10 years. But then as my retreats and the teaching was just really taking off, I just had to dive totally into that and give to that. So it's still an ongoing question for me around what do I offer on Dana, and when do I actually like charge a certain. So for the In Your Own Skin program, there was a base cost that covered like my studio fees and my staff, because I have staff that I pay a normal wage to. So I'm still working all of that out while I'm on Dana. How do we support me? Sometimes a little bit in the base cost will cover their wages and go into admin. And so it's an
Mm.
ongoing
Yeah.
inquiry for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's very interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think you'd be doing if you weren't a meditation teacher? Have you ever
Ah,
contemplated that?
yes, totally. Well, I do write as well, and I'm looking for part of me being more balanced, more time for my own writing. That's a real love. I reckon, well, there's a few things too, can I say?
Mm.
I would have loved to be a dancer. That was at art school, I was dancing a lot, and I was a gymnast as a kid, so the love of movement. And I've also had and I don't know, this could be total romantic fantasy, but actually like to drive an ambulance.
Wow.
That's always been like an image.
Wow. Just to
Yeah.
drive one, not to work in the back, just drive through the streets.
No. To actually work, like to be with people in those times of deep distress,
To
like
be an
as an
AMBO, yeah, a frontline
being a
person, yeah. Wow.
frontline.
Wow. Oh, well,
Again, that's
maybe in the next life.
yeah, that and a dancer, they're quite extreme, aren't they?
Well, I can sort of see there's a lot of movement involved. It's a lot of activity, a lot of action,
Yeah,
you know. But yeah.
yeah,
Look, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, Jess. Is there anything else you might like to share with us around teaching before we wind up our conversation? Perhaps something that, as a
mm,
teacher, that you've learned along the way that you
yeah,
think could be of value to the people listening that you could share with them, something important.
yes. I think what's been interesting for me is everything has really come out of my dedication to my own practice and following that and pursuing that and listening to myself has there's opened up opportunities. You know, if you listen and you start to see, oh, where's the need for my gift? Where's the need for how I can contribute? And I think, you know, there's the practice and then there's the follow through of to feel where do you feel you sort of, where will you be of service? Where will you be of support or what excites you? And then to follow it. But like I've done very little, I've come the other way. Like I've done very little initially marketing, like it grew through word of mouth and it grew through my love of practice. And so that's what drove me. And then in time, it started to build up around me and the support came. And now, you know, retreats are full and things are really flourishing, but it came from the sincerity to practice. So I think that will open it up. And then to be brave, then to also, if you feel ready, to follow through and kind of go for it. If it's like, no, I really want to work in that community or that community, to listen deeply and put into action your heart's kind of instinct. Mm.
Wow. So
So what?
back to your love affair.
Yeah, I think it sort of
Yeah.
is like but that also can translate into outer life. So it's not just a romantic idea, but that can clear away the debris so you can sort of see where you want to situate yourself and where you want to move,
Mm,
where you may be of service, and then to act on that, to be
mm.
brave.
Wow.
Because there's so many domains now that will benefit from mindfulness teachers, and there's so many different teachers working in different ways, and I think they've all got a lot to offer. I also think to be really true about what you can offer and what you can't, like where you sit and what your skills are, so you can feel really comfortable in your seat, that you're not overreaching and you're not underreaching, and you can really sit and claim it in a way that's appropriate to your own training, whatever that might be, you know.
Mm. I agree
That
with
makes,
you. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that makes students feel really safe.
Mm.
And then I
Yeah.
think that sort of gives an accountability to like that we can, yeah, because meditation also opens up a lot in people. So you want to be equipped to be able to meet that.
Yeah. Ready. Yeah.
Ready. Yeah, and we all
Wow.
get ready in different ways, you know. I
Mm.
also don't think that's just one linear way for one person and
Mm.
so many different entry points. But yeah, I think the passion for practice and then the follow through to put what you care about into action, and when the time's right, to really go for it.
Mm. Oh, well, thank you very much for sharing that. I
Mm.
couldn't agree. Snap. You know, I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
And
Yeah.
look, I will wind up with a few words, but I just wanted to honor what you've told us today by
Okay.
just
Mhm.
playing some beauty.
Mm.
Oh, that was a bit loud. Sorry.
I like it. Let's go for it. Whoosh!
Listen to me.
Doesn't
Klutz.
always be gentle. No, no.
Sorry, I just needed to kiss them. There we go. Thank you very much.
So pleasure. Can I just say thank you so much for inviting me to come? And I watched your interview that you did around the mindfulness of May with, what's her name again? I know her
Elise,
name.
yeah.
With lovely Elise. And yeah, I just got a good feeling watching you in
Oh,
that.
that's lovely to hear. Thank you
That
so
was really
much.
nice. I appreciate your generous questions and your kind of, your intuition in what you've been asking me. And
Oh, great. Well, thank you. That's great feedback. But it's a pleasure, you know, connecting with other people who are passionate about teaching meditation, as I am, across all sorts of contexts and traditions. It's always, I think, so rewarding to hear their perspective on what they do and why they do it. Yeah.
mm,
So, Elise, sorry, not Elise, here we go. You can tell I've reached the end of my focus. I'm so sorry, Jess. People can find out more about your events and programs and things like that from your website, and that's jesshuon.com. Is that right? Is that the best place to find out? Yeah.
www.jesshuon.com, and then there's a newsletter that people can sign up to where I'm really sort of articulating what's happening. And then we've got the Facebook and we've got the Instagram now. So now we're kind of
fully integrated.
We're integrating. Now I'm like, yeah, that's just happened this last year, is working out how to keep reaching the people that we want to reach, and just reach the student body because they're all over. So anyway, it's working really well.
Terrific. Well, thank you again for your time. It's been a pleasure, and thank you, of course, for listening to Jess and my conversation today. And just to let you know, Meditation Australia has a whole bunch of resources and services and places to find out where to learn to teach if that piques your interest on our website, which is meditationaustralia.org.au. If you are a meditator and you're looking for a registered member in your area, you can also visit the website. There's a map there that will let you know where they are in your neighbourhood. And my name's Megan Spencer, and I really look forward to speaking to you again another time. Thank you very much for listening.